Well, hello and welcome to Rajat TV. You're watching India Fights Back with host Rajat Kain. Well, in this edition of the show, we'll understand the results of Phase 2 clinical trial of Covaxin, India's indigenously developed COVID-19 vaccine candidate. Now, following the positive first phase results, Bharat Biotech's Covaxin is found to be safe with no serious adverse events during the second stage of trial as well. Remember, the first phase of the Covaxin was termed as positive with results like no side effect and an active antigen being produced. Now, the study has shown the result have been positive in the second stage of trial as well. Now, the result now out in public, the phase 2 study shows there are tolerable safety outcomes with enhanced humoral and cell-mediated immune response. That is exactly the way it's been described in the outcomes for the, in a common parlance, we can say the results are positive, it's safe, and of course, it is producing antibodies and there is no any seen side effects. Now, the primary objective of the study was to determine how many of the participants showed antibodies in their immune system. To discuss more on this very important development, we're joined with three panelists, I beg your pardon. Dr. Aparna Mukherjee, she is scientist from ICMR, Professor Narendra Kumar Arora, Executive Director, INCLEN, and Dr. Dhruva Chaudhry, he is Senior Professor, Pandit B.D. Sharma, PGIMS, Rohtak. Well, many thanks for joining us. Let me start with you, Dr. Mukherjee, scientist from ICMR. Ma'am, what do we make out of the findings of the second stage trial of Covaxin?
Right. The second phase 2 trial of Covaxin, the results of which are now out in public domain. From there, we could actually discern that there has, enough antibodies are being produced, as well as cell-mediated. That's the other arm of immunity, which also helps in fighting against viruses and bacteria. So there also we are getting a Th1 skewed response. That is the type of response that we would like for fighting viruses. And along with that, the phase 1 volunteers who had been followed up, this must be 3 months, that's 104 days, which is 3 months from their last dose, they also have shown substantial amount of antibodies in them, which is kind of good news that antibodies are persisting at 3 months time point as well.
Right. Many thanks for your opening remarks, Dr. Aparna Mukherjee. Professor Narendra Kumar Arora, let me understand the entire process of the clinical trial. So now we have the first phase results, we have the second phase results, and then of course there will be a third phase results. Now, even after we have got the results of all the phases, will the vaccines, rather we can say the efficacy of vaccine would be still under process, or to say it's still work in progress, or we can say, okay, vaccine is safe and that can be used forever now?
So I would like to go to the context of this whole Covaxin manufacture and development. This is probably the second or the third totally indigenous vaccine, completely having R&D and then coming up to this phase. So it's a matter of great pride for the country, number one. Number two, that this vaccine holds a lot of promise in the sense that I have seen the preclinical results of this. I've seen the phase 1 and now phase 2 results also. And clearly the study is showing that there is very good immunogenicity. Now, as very rightly said, you mentioned in your opening remarks that there are two types of immunity. One is antibody related, and the second is T-cell related. And the major concern today of all the scientists is that whatever protection is developed, it should be long lasting also. And the vaccine should be safe. So in phase 1 of any study and phase 2, primarily one is looking at the safety aspect. One is also looking at what dose is the most appropriate dose. And the third component, that there is an immune response to the antigen or the vaccine which has been given. And this vaccine seems to have fulfilled those criteria pretty well. And they are very encouraging reports. Now, the third phase, which you said, that the next phase, which is very important, is to say that when we actually go, what is the taste of the pudding is actually in eating. And that is what is phase 3. That now when it goes into phase 3, what is the level of protection it will provide to those who are given this vaccine. So phase 3 will tell us, we have now known that it produces immune response, it is safe, but phase 3 will tell us how much protective it is. And so we also know that the WHO benchmark criteria is that the vaccine should be at least 50% to be allowed for to go into public health. So that is a very critical component. But the whole vaccine, so far trials, scientific trials have started on a very sound footing. And next is that to see how effective it is. And once we have that results, this can be very safely given to Indians and even people abroad.
Right. That's very important, sir. So basically, as you rightly mentioned with an analogy that the taste of the pudding is in the eating. So now the third phase would be the one that will decipher, how long-lasting, or you can say the safety quantum of the vaccine that has to be decided in the third phase. Dr. Dhruva Chaudhry, sir, now, since we're discussing the technicalities bit of the vaccine and its safety and its efficacy, as we have seen of late, there are new strands or new strains of virus, new mutants of virus. So there is a very common question among all of us. So what trials we're conducting on this vaccine? Will it be also applicable on the new mutants of virus, or for the new mutant, there would be a new phases of trial? So,
thank you, Rajat. I think Dr. Arora and Dr. Aparna has very clearly set the ball rolling, that this is in terms of safety, in terms of immunogenicity, what we had seen the data, it is as good as any of your Moderna or Pfizer vaccines is concerned.
Right.
And second, you're very rightly out. There's a lot of hoopla is about the mutations. Mutations are bound to be there in the viruses, and it will be far more commonly seen in RNA viruses. I think that also should be very clear to everybody. Somewhere the science has got lost in the public health domain. Now, first, and obviously the pressures of the people have been there, and the media which is there. Mutations are bound to be there. And if you see the new strain, nearly around about, they have described 14 mutations. Out of them, 6 are the ones which have no effect in terms of synonymous mutations. That means that they are producing the same protein which is otherwise being produced by the other genes. Rest, which have been which are different. The other ones which are different actually are the ones which are creating major problem for us, are the 69, 70 deletions, and also in the spike protein when there have been a replacement of a particular amino acid by another amino acid. So it is making it little bind tighter. But nowhere we are seeing that it is altering the basic structure or the nature of the virus. Therefore, my perception, as of the little bit of the science whichever I know, and I think Dr. Arora will probably chip in, is that it probably is that we need to be careful. But at the same time, my feeling with the past experiences is that it's likely to be effective. And if anything is required, is something like we are doing it in influenza viruses later on, small amount of tweaking can work it out. But by and large, as of now, whatever the data is in the public domain, on the basis of that, one can say that that these vaccines are going to be safe and effective.
That's very important. So clearly, we have these medical experts spelling out in the opening remarks about the efficacy of the vaccine, especially the phase 2 trial. Dr. Aparna Mukherjee, ma'am, in terms of the extent of the trials, now this vaccine has been tried on the sample collected from 9 separate states. You think that's fairly large sample to come down to conclusion, and we can safely say we have tested by and large, all the interested groups perhaps we should have conducted tests on, or you think we need to, I mean, we need little more sample size in subsequent phases?
Well, the clinical trial phases and their sample size are kind of different because their purpose is different. So if you're talking of a phase 1 and then a phase 2 studies, they are not usually very large studies, because here the main purpose is, to, as Sir said, it is to determine the safety as well as which dose is actually being effective. So to actually, titrate out that dose. So it's in the phase 3 where we will need a large sample size, and they have plans to enroll around 26,000 people. So that is where actually the efficacy, as we talk of the protective efficacy, will actually come out. So for a phase 2 trial, this sample sizes are usually of this range.
Right. Absolutely. Professor Arora, I mean, when we talk of the side effects, which are the ones that are usually looked out to strike out and completely infer that the vaccine's efficacy is right on the dot?
So there are 2 or 3 things. One is that this whole disease is less than a year old. So we do not know much about the disease. It is still evolving. We are still learning.
Right.
Number 2, the vaccines, the very fact that there was intense eagerness across the globe in every segment of a corner of this planet, that people wanted a vaccine as soon as possible. So over 300 or 200 plus candidates are there. Now, so there are some what are called as usual adverse events or side effects of antigen when antigen is injected. Local pain, swelling, some mild fever for a day or so, fatigue. These are very common. And there is another interesting thing which has come up within last 4 or 5 weeks. It has come to everybody's knowledge, is that when RNA vaccine is given, then the local pain, fever is much higher. The local reactions are much higher as compared to a inactivated virus, which Covaxin is there. The second is not uncommon, is this anaphylaxis or allergic response. So anaphylaxis or allergic response occurs usually 1 in 5 lakh to 10 lakh injections. But it appears, so obviously with 380 sample size, we will not get. We have to have a huge sample size to get that. And that usually you start picking up when it goes into public domain.
Right.
Because we know from Pfizer and Moderna, particularly Pfizer, the allergic responses are a little higher as compared to the previous vaccines. Now, the third important component is there are some theoretical risks, and which have been seen as with some of the recently released vaccine. So dengue vaccine is given in Philippines and Mexico, and in a few patients or subjects, what happened when they were exposed to dengue virus, the disease was more severe. So that similar thing is to be observed again with all the new COVID vaccines also. So that's why there is a very good infrastructure. I was just discussing with Dhruva prior to this, that a good vaccine safety infrastructure has been put in place. So I think people in this country should feel very safe and comfortable and have confidence, because I think we have world's largest vaccine safety surveillance mechanism. Every district has a panel of experts who will monitor safety and take prompt action to manage it, and also investigate if it is causally linked. So that, but there are some other uncommon things which may have some convulsions, or if there is a more generalized rash and other things. But we will have to see. because the sample size we have for this vaccine or any other vaccine, there are 5, 6 front runners globally. No major side effects have been seen so far, except the one I mentioned just now.
Right. That's right. Dr. Chaudhry, now, since we have achieved, or to say, with the phase 2 of clinical trial, we have come to know that the primary objective, the secondary objective, both the outcomes seems to be matching the expectations. So now, in the third phase, what are the deductions that you'll be looking at as a scientist, as a medical practitioner, or somebody who is studying the vaccines or threadbare? So what is that you're looking at the third phase of trial so as to completely mark it safe?
Professor Arora has been very lucid about it. What we are looking at in phase 3, right now we are like at Rohtak, we have already given to more than 400 people in the phase 3. We intend to complete the 1,000 cases. Idea is now we are going into the real life scenarios where we are seeing to it that the people, like in the earlier phases, we did not take anybody who had a diabetes or any other risk factors or people who had, let's say, the healthcare worker. Now we are taking all these cases. So we, as Professor Arora said, from taking care of the basic objectives, now we are going to the real life scenario situations. Here we are not testing anybody for looking at whether you have an antibody, you have not. So anybody who's coming, we are offering it as it would be offered to anybody in the real life. And that is where the final output decide how it is going to be. And so far, we have injected to more than 400 people. The side effects maximum we have seen is a fever for a day or so. And a couple of people have some diet, nothing more than that. Very well tolerated. And as a scientist, I'm looking very eagerly for this phase. And you will be surprised that I also want to share 30% of these out of the 1,300 people have to be 65 years or above the age. People have to be medical practitioners or having a controlled comorbidities so that we know how will it work. Because when you look at the statistics, total, the data, it is actually those people who had multiple comorbidities for different reasons have poorly with the disease. So idea is to reduce that in addition to the prevention of rest of the public so that our life can go back to normal. So in short, I will look for 3 things. It's clinical effectiveness over time, A, in the population which is most vulnerable and the frontline workers, normal workers can go away. And third is over a period of time, as we have seen at the short time, up to 3 months, it is how it's because we are going to follow these cases for 9 months to 1 year. So how over a period of year, the immunogenicity and reactogenicity is somewhat. We are hopeful looking at the data which has come up that probably it is going to hold its own up to a year at least.
Right. Dr. Mukherjee, as we move towards the third phase trial, of course, like then there'll be a rolling of the vaccines. So among the target groups that you will study, which are the specific ones would be studied for, as I said, for inferring the absolute efficacy of the vaccine? When the third phase trial begins.
Okay. First of all, calling it an absolute efficacy is something very difficult. Just like Dr. Arora said, that it is always when any vaccine, any medicine, when it is actually rolled out, there's something called post-marketing surveillance. That is when it is used in the real life. Many of the side effects or many of the effects as well, which were not expected in the trials, actually come to the forefront, come to the notice of the researchers and the physicians. So there's nothing absolute in medicine. But yes, we would definitely want to see whether the healthcare workers, like Sir said, those who have high levels of exposure, as well as the ones with older people with comorbidities, whether they are also mounting enough immunogenic antibodies to this particular vaccine.
Right. Now, before I move to other panelists, Dr. Mukherjee, just a supplementary question to you in terms of discussing the rollout of the vaccine and the logistics. Now, as we have a tremendous, I would say, a gigantic size of population. So, will there be challenges to begin with, given our extremely successful past programs of mass vaccination, would be a benchmark to say of?
It's always challenging to deal with a large and diverse country like ours. But as you said, we have a very successful immunization system, and for childhood immunization, at least we have the whole system in place.
Yeah.
So it will roll. There might be challenges. There's always a challenge when there's such a big program is rolled out. But then there is a lot of planning which has been going in, and as to the whole logistics, the cold chain, where it will be applied, and how the side effects will be the surveillance will be carried out and managed, and so forth and so on. So I guess it will be a good endeavor.
Absolutely, it certainly will be a good endeavor, and having a mass vaccination program in a country of a population and diversity in terms of size and quantum is fairly huge. Well, moving on to just the closing phase of our program, Professor Gupta, and then Professor Arora, I beg your pardon. I have usually when we talk of the vaccine, we have seen there is a sense among people, or rather they've been fairly dichotomous, whether vaccine would be the end thing. Or secondly, the thing is that people keep on asking us like whether we'll be still susceptible even after having a vaccine, or vaccine would be an absolute, or rather, I beg your pardon again, because there is nothing absolute, as Dr. Mukherjee has pointed out. So will vaccine would be, we can safely say that's the end of the pandemic?
So vaccination has two objectives. One is it protects individual from the infection and the disease. The second, it also has a public health or community objective. After all, the pandemic is there because there is massive and rapid spread of virus in the community. So these two objectives are there. So to protect the person, if somebody is affected, vaccine will certainly do, even if it is 50-60% effective, or if it is 95% effective. So that relative effectiveness will prevent. So if I give it to 100, whether it prevents infection in 80%, 60%, that issue is there. The second important component of these viral vaccines is that it interrupts the way it is spreading into the community, which is called interruption in the transmission dynamics. So when a critical number of people in the community have already been exposed either to the virus or to the vaccine, then the virus transmission gets interrupted.
Right.
So we are at the first phase, the country's objective. You have already know that we will be immunizing 30 crore people in next 4 months. Your answer to the previous question is yes, the country is completely prepared. It is an army-like operation and it will be done.
Yes.
The second thing is that the most susceptible, that means more than 50, have 75% of deaths in this country are occurring in individuals above the age of 50 years. So we will take care of that death and unfortunate events. The second thing is that simultaneously, these people will not allow should not allow virus to move around so easily because a large number of people within the community are there. So transmission is likely to be affected, but more people will need to be immunized so that pandemic can come under control. So, but we do not know at this time, the science we do not have the data or modeling exercise that when we can interrupt the transmission of virus, which will kind of predict the termination of the pandemic. So that is something which we still need to work on.
Right. Well, many thanks, Professor Narendra Kumar Arora. We have to leave it here. Many thanks to Dr. Aparna Mukherjee, and many thanks Dr. Dhruva Chaudhry for joining us and discussing this extremely important subject of phase 2 clinical trial of the Covaxin and the way ahead with the third phase, as well as the caveats, what scientists would like to study and the experts, of course, and the challenge that our administration will absolutely overcome in days to come when it comes to the mass vaccination. Many thanks for all our viewers as well. But before we leave, a small appeal by RSTV to all our viewers. Well, keep following your COVID-appropriate behavior. Keep wearing a face mask, keep washing your hands, and don't forget to maintain a physical distance. Remember, these are small little things that can help us in defeating the pandemic. For watching this edition of the show, thank you and goodbye.
Watch the big picture